General Hospital spoilers teasing that Jordan Ashford has never been more certain in her life. She strides into her ex-husband's loft with the confidence of a woman who holds the evidence that could shatter a criminal empire. "Curtis," she tells him, voice firm yet laced with triumph, "I've nearly got him. I have half the proof. I need to put Jens Sidwell behind bars where he belongs." Curtis Ashford, ever the wary partner and former husband, meets her gaze with a mixture of pride and concern. He knows Jordan's brilliance, her tenacity, and her tendency to dive headlong into danger. Yet today, she seems different, resolute, triumphant, convinced she can finish the job herself. The game of cat and mouse. It all began 6 months earlier when Jordan first discovered Sidwell's clandestine network of offshore accounts. At the PCPD Cybercrime Division, she unearthed encrypted transaction logs linking Sidwell to a string of violent assaults disguised as medical emergencies. Patients left comatose, evidence of assault hidden beneath layers of falsified hospital records, and payments funneled through shell companies. Each clue that Jordan unearthed sent a thrill of righteous outrage coursing through her veins. Sidwell's crimes were particularly insidious. He used the veneer of legitimate business to prey on the vulnerable, hiring actors to pose as nurses, therapists, even caretakers for minor children, all to gain proximity to victims whose lives he could destroy, blackmail, or exploit for profit. Jordan's strategy was twofold: gather incontrovertible proof of Sidwell's operations, and then lure him in so that he would lower his guard. She started by planting false leads in underground forums, hints at her own insecurity, and whispers that she might be open to a truce if Sidwell were willing to negotiate. Within weeks, she secured an introduction through a mutual acquaintance, a young doctor unwittingly drawn into Sidwell's orbit. Jordan, using a carefully constructed alias, arranged late-night consultations under the guise of whistleblowing. Sidwell, curious and cunning, agreed to a meeting in a disused wing of the Metro Court Hospital. Curtis accompanied Jordan to that first encounter, disguised as a maintenance worker carrying a toolbox. Jordan's heart hammered as she peeked through a frosted glass panel into the hallway beyond the locked door. Inside, Sidwell stood in a tailored suit, eyes cold and calculating as he scanned the empty corridor. Jordan's first instinct was to flee, to call in backup and expose him in the sterile fusillade of police lights. Yet her plan hinged on patience. She watched as Sidwell tested the door, then pivoted to face the camera she had disabled moments before. Jordan slipped inside, feigning anxiety, her palms damp around a file folder holding screenshots of transaction ledgers. "Jens," she said, voice steady, "I have something you should see." Sidwell's expression flickered, pleasure, amusement, suspicion, and Jordan felt the electric thrill of being on his radar. Their conversation began as negotiation. She would accept immunity in exchange for immunity for her source. Sidwell played along, but Jordan knew he was assessing her, testing whether she was bluffing, gauging her desperation. When she left that night, she carried with her a data stick containing fragments of Sidwell's communications, encrypted emails between him and a mysterious operator. Though incomplete, these fragments formed the first half of the puzzle she needed to bring him down. Back at home, Jordan filtered through the data in her private office, screens glowing with code and financial charts. She cross-referenced metadata, traced IP addresses, and used every tool in her arsenal: digital forensics, social engineering, old-fashioned legwork. Each piece of the puzzle that fell into place hardened her conviction. Sidwell was a monster hiding in plain sight. She confided only in Curtis, giving him cursory updates but shielding him from the details, both to protect him and to keep her own advantage. She believed that if she exposed the scheme prematurely, Sidwell might sense the net closing and cut his ties, vanishing into the shadows. What Jordan didn't know was that Sidwell had anticipated her every move. Long before their first meeting, he had embedded a mole in her inner circle, Isaiah Gannon. Isaiah, A familiar face from her days as a young detective, once trusted as Jordan's protege, had quietly rejoined her team under the guise of offering cybersecurity consulting. He volunteered to help Jordan decode the data stick, offering insights that seemed invaluable. Jordan, her guard lowered by years of mentorship, welcomed his assistance. As they pored over the fragments late into the night, Isaiah pointed out patterns and suggested connections she hadn't seen. Jordan felt gratitude swelling in her chest. Here was someone who understood her, who shared her mission. But Isaiah's real task was far darker, to systematically erase and corrupt every file Jordan collected. Each night, as Jordan slept, Isaiah copied her decrypted files to a hidden partition and then planted malware that would overwrite the original documents. When Jordan awoke the next morning, she found her analysis intact, but Isaiah's hidden copies remained, ready to serve Sidwell. The true half of Sidwell's evidence slipped through her fingers without her knowing. With only half the proof secured, Jordan escalated her tactics. She arranged a second meeting with Sidwell, this time in a lavish suite at the Port Charles Hotel, where Sidwell could trust the anonymity of a high-end setting. Jordan, wearing a deliberately professional yet subtly alluring ensemble, pitched herself as eager to negotiate directly. She needed to get closer, to see his operation from the inside, to extract the final pieces of the puzzle. Throughout the night, they danced a delicate waltz of words, Sidwell feigning benevolence, Jordan masking her intent behind flirtatious laughter. When the clock struck midnight, Sidwell made his move. He invited Jordan closer, gesturing for her to sit on his lap. Jordan felt the flame of anger and fear ignite in her chest. Everything in her training screamed that this was a trap. But she forced herself to comply, leaning in, letting her arm brush his, eyes fixed on his face to read the moment when he would let down his guard. She whispered the name of one of his subsidiaries, testing whether he would flinch. Sidwell's grin widened, and for an instant, Jordan believed she had him cornered. Then his expression shifted to something feral. "You think you can destroy me, Detective Ashford?" His voice was low, deadly calm. "I've known you were playing me from the start." Jordan's stomach lurched. This was the moment she realized she had been outplayed. Sidwell was far more dangerous and perceptive than she'd given him credit for. He stood, eyes glittering with malicious triumph, and placed a hand at the small of her back. "You've been very clever," he said softly, grinding her against him. "But you're in my world now, and I control the rules." He leaned in until his lips brushed her ear. "If I wanted, I could kill you right here, and no one would ever find the body." Panicked adrenaline surged through Jordan's veins. She hadn't come this far to be silenced. With a violent shove, she broke free and stumbled toward the door. Sidwell's laughter echoed behind her like ice water poured down her spine. Jordan fled the suite, heart hammering, every step echoing with the knowledge that her secret evidence was already compromised. Back at her safe house, Jordan locked every door and window, her breath ragged. She scanned the empty corridors, expecting to see the glint of a knife blade at any moment. Hours later, when she finally felt safe enough to exhale, her phone buzzed. A text from Isaiah. "You okay, Jordan? I warned you about getting too close. You should hand over everything you've got. I'll keep it safe for you." Jordan stared at the message. In her panic, she had sent residual copies of her files to Isaiah's encrypted folder. She had trusted him implicitly. When Jordan arrived at their agreed meeting spot, a quiet cafe away from police scrutiny, Isaiah offered a comforting smile. His warm eyes and gentle tone soothed her frayed nerves. "Jordan, you're a genius," he told her, voice soft. "But Sidwell is poison. He's going to lash out, and you can't protect yourself alone. Give me your files. I'll store them where Sidwell can't touch them." Jordan hesitated, memories of betrayal flashing through her mind, of the cold steel of Sidwell's threat, of her own vulnerability. But Isaiah's hand on hers felt reassuring, and the idea of protecting the evidence without risking it on her own unsteady system was tempting. With trembling hands, Jordan transferred her remaining encrypted data to Isaiah's drive. She watched as the progress bar filled, sealing her only path to Sidwell's downfall in someone else's hands. Isaiah's grin widened as he pulled the drive close. "Rest now," he said gently. "I've got this." What Jordan didn't know, and what Isaiah had never revealed, was that every byte of her evidence was already corrupted or deleted. His loyalty had always been to Sidwell. His warmth, his counsel, his comforting embrace, all meticulously calculated to coax her into relinquishing control. And now, with the last shred of proof out of Jordan's reach, Sidwell's empire stood unassailable once more. When Jordan returned home that night, she sank to the floor in her office, head in her hands. The realization crashed over her like a tidal wave. She had walked straight into Sidwell's trap. The files were gone. The evidence she thought was her shield had been stripped away by the one person she believed she could trust. As dawn broke over Port Charles, Jordan sat at her desk, eyes hollow with exhaustion and dawning horror. Curtis found her there, unshaven and disheveled. He knelt beside her, voice gentle. "Jordan, what happened?" She looked up, tears glistening. "He knows," she whispered. "Sidwell knows everything. And Isaiah, he's been on Sidwell's payroll from the start." Curtis wrapped Jordan in his arms, the weight of her betrayal and near-death experience pressing on them both. She clung to him, grief and fury entwined. "What do we do now?" Curtis asked quietly. Jordan closed her eyes, drawing strength from his presence. "We start over, from scratch. Because the war isn't over." But as Jordan watched Curtis's concerned face fade from the doorway, she realized the truth she must now face alone. In the shadowy game of cat and mouse she had waged, she had become the mouse, outmaneuvered by a predator whose reach extended into the deepest chambers of her heart. Shattered alliances and a new resolve. In the days that followed, Jordan retreated from the world, haunted by Sidwell's threat and Isaiah's betrayal. Each noise in her apartment sent her heart racing. She triple-locked every door and peephole, convinced she was always one step behind lethal retribution. In the days that followed, Jordan retreated from the world, haunted by the echo of Sidwell's threat and the sting of Isaiah's betrayal. Every creak of her apartment felt like the approach of a hired killer. Every shadow seemed to hide a knife's glint. She slept fitfully, waking to the same nightmare, Sidwell's cold smile as he pressed her against him in that hotel suite, his whisper that her death would go unnoticed. Curtis found her in this spiral one rainy afternoon, slumped at her desk amid scattering caffeine-stained files. He knelt beside her, gently prying her fingers from the edge of a blade she had pressed against her palm to feel real pain. "We'll fix this," he promised, voice steady. But Jordan shook her head, tears tracking down her cheeks. "He's already won," she murmured. "My evidence is gone, and she stopped, bitterness curdling her throat. "He never loved me." Curtis wouldn't let her give in. He spent the next 24 hours working every contact he'd made in the U.S. Attorney's Office, the PCPD, and even Anna Devane's old network of vigilante allies. By dawn, he'd assembled a small team: Detective Harrison Chase to bring procedural weight, tech genius Felix Dubois to trace digital footprints, and a reluctant but driven Anna Devane, whose investigative instincts still burned as bright as ever. Their first breakthrough came when Felix discovered that, even though Isaiah had deleted Jordan's local files, every time Jordan accessed them, her computer automatically synced an encrypted backup to a secure cloud server, one she'd set up months ago on Curtis's advice. Using a clandestine VPN and Anna's credentials at the university, Felix extracted those backups. Over the next few hours, with Anna's meticulous, eye-catching every forged timestamp and Curtis's legal guidance ensuring every step was admissible in court, they reconstructed the evidence Jordan thought she'd lost. As Jordan watched the data reassemble, bank transfers, email threads between Sidwell and his operatives, audio clips of his own voice bargaining for assaults in surgical scrubs, her resolve hardened. "We've still got him," she whispered, voice trembling but determined. But confronting Sidwell head-on would play into his hands. He thrived on fear and control. A public showdown could put Jordan in even greater danger. Instead, the team devised a sting that would turn Sidwell's own methods against him. Undercover, Jordan would contact Sidwell one more time, this time offering to hand over new evidence she claimed to have uncovered about his most sensitive operations. The meeting would take place in a shipping container at the old docks, a location isolated enough to keep media out, but close enough to a squad of armed Peace PD officers waiting in the shadows. On the night of the operation, Jordan disguised herself in an unremarkable windbreaker and jeans, her face framed by a loose cap and sunglasses. Curtis gave her one last embrace in the empty warehouse, pressing a small body cam into her hand. "I'm coming for you," he vowed softly. Anna and Chase stationed themselves at vantage points, radios deadened but ready on silent alert. Sidwell arrived precisely on time, tall, immaculately dressed, his tailored coat brushing the concrete floor like a predator's tail. He smiled a slow, calculating smile when he saw Jordan step from the darkness. "Detective Ashford," he drawled, voice velvet over steel. "I wondered when you'd come crawling back." Jordan kept her voice steady. "You know what I have," she said, holding up a slim flash drive. "Everything you've done, the hits disguised as medical emergencies, the untraceable payments, the lives you've ruined. Hand over your end of the deal, and I walk away." Sidwell chuckled, but as he reached for the drive, he recoiled. "You still don't understand, do you?" He lifted his coat to reveal the grip of a handgun at his hip. "This ends tonight." At that signal, Sidwell's loyal henchman stepped from the shadows, Isaiah Gannon, face pale but eyes fierce. Jordan felt her heart lurch. Isaiah's betrayal had cut deeper than any blow. "I'm sorry," Isaiah said quietly, voice cracking. "He made me choose." Before Jordan could respond, Sidwell lunged toward her. At that instant, Curtis and Chase burst through a side doorway, guns drawn. "Freeze, Sidwell," Curtis commanded. Sidwell turned, eyes blazing, and raised his weapon. The warehouse exploded into action. Chase tackled Isaiah, wrenching him away from Sidwell. Curtis dove behind a stacked pallet for cover. Anna sprinted forward, firing a flashbang that shattered the container's silence. Sidwell staggered, blinded, and Jordan seized her chance, delivering a solid kick to his knee that sent him crashing to the ground. By the time backup squads flooded the area, Sidwell lay cuffed and groaning, Isaiah pinned beside him. Curtis shook Jordan's arm, relief flooding his features. "You did it," he breathed. Jordan, panting, wiped blood from her lip and met his gaze. "We did it." At police headquarters the next morning, Jordan stood before a grand jury, her voice clear and steady as she recounted every detail of Sidwell's conspiracies and Isaiah's betrayal. Isaiah listened in a glass-walled room, head bowed, tears streaming down his cheeks as the weight of his crimes settled upon him. Sidwell, seated beside him, sneered defiantly when Jordan testified. But when prosecutors played the body cam footage, Jordan's calm delivery under Sidwell's threat, Isaiah's confession at the docks, Sidwell's own admission of hiring the nurse assassins, the jury stared in stunned silence. 2 weeks later, Sidwell was sentenced to life without parole, handed over to a maximum security facility. Isaiah, whose cooperation earned him a reduced sentence, was remanded to a psychiatric division before prison, where he would receive treatment for the trauma of his own choices and the manipulations Sidwell had inflicted upon him. With the threat extinguished, Jordan returned to her apartment for the first time without flinching at every sound. Curtis helped her unpack the small keepsakes she'd left behind in her flight to Fear, framed photos of their wedding day, newspaper clippings of her promotions, an old friendship bracelet Isaiah had once given her in training. They hung side by side on the wall of her newly reclaimed office, a testament not only to victory but to survival. In the weeks that followed, Jordan and Curtis slowly rebuilt their relationship, forging a bond of mutual respect stronger than either had known before. Jordan found peace in mentoring young detectives once more, this time teaching them the lessons she'd learned about trust and vigilance. Curtis, proud and protective, took a quieter role, content to support her from the sidelines rather than lead the charge. On a sunny afternoon in September, Jordan stood outside Peace PD headquarters, ready to accept the Medal of Valor. As Commissioner Gregory Chase pinned the medal to her uniform, he whispered, "You chose courage over fear." Jordan smiled, glancing at Curtis in the gallery, his eyes shining with pride. Beside him stood Anna Devane, whose fierce loyalty and cunning had saved Jordan's life twice over. "Thank you," Jordan whispered back. Then, in front of cheering colleagues and press cameras, she dedicated her award to every victim, every sister, every child who believed no one can help me, so they'll know that justice can be won even when the darkness seems absolute. That night, over takeout on her apartment balcony, Jordan and Curtis watched the city lights blink on. Curtis took her hand. "What now?" he asked, smiling at the future that once seemed so uncertain. Jordan leaned into him, content. "We live," she said softly. "And we protect each other, always."